Tom, while we're waiting, why don't you introduce yourself to the people? Some of them know you and some of them don't, but tell them how you got hooked into this, fished out of the pond to come feed us all.
Well, thank you for allowing me to talk this evening. I want to welcome everybody to join us here. I am participating from the state of Idaho, where I am directing a large project that involves the restoration of many wetland areas, including vernal ponds. And we're building these to provide habitat for the sturgeon and for the burbot, two rare fish. And also, we're building quite a few wetlands to provide habitat for the western painted turtle and the northern leopard frog that depend on the vernal ponds. So we have 7 pieces of heavy equipment working, and the project is going to take 3 months to complete. So it's quite an undertaking. But what we're going to be talking about today is a smaller project, but just as important because of how many people enjoy seeing wildlife species that will use these vernal ponds. So I'm happy to be with you folks. I started building wetlands 46 years ago, and I've built over 3,000 in my career, and each one's a bit different, and each one is of great value. So I'm just happy that we can talk about my favorite subject tonight.
Okay, is everyone in? Yes, Lindsey Graham, have you gotten all your friends in? Would you unmute and tell us how fantastic you are and helping to publicize this event? Yes, Lindsey Graham is our daughter, Matthew's sister. Yes, Lindsey, we're waiting for you. Oh, well. Okay, well, if everybody is ready, why don't you start sharing your screen and I think everyone is muted. I'll mute myself and
Is everyone able to see the image of the vernal pool on the screen, the title slide? Hopefully.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, that's good news. Okay. Well, I'm Tom Biebighauser. I work as a wildlife biologist and wetland ecologist, and I started restoring vernal pools over 20 years ago. And I've been working to do this all across North America and around the world. And I'm just happy to talk to you folks about vernal pools tonight. Now, vernal pools are wetland areas that will dry up from time to time. They're really just big puddles. And this vernal pool you're looking at here was built by volunteers, and it was built at McBrayer Elementary School in Moorhead, Kentucky, where I live. And we built this vernal pool from soil that was high in clay. And it only took us 4 hours to build. But this wetland will fill in spring. It will fill with the heavy rains and with snowmelt, and then it will dry this time of year in the fall. Now, vernal pools are also called vernal ponds. They're called ephemeral wetlands, and they're called seasonal wetlands. And these names all describe wetlands that contain water for part of the year. Again, they're big puddles. And the vernal ponds will normally fill with water in the spring, and come summer or fall, they will go dry. And the photo you're looking at here is a vernal pool that we restored on the Danube National Forest in Kentucky back in 2006. And this
Tom, you're not sharing your screen.
Groundwater.
Tom, we're looking at you.
Okay, well,
you're not sharing your screen.
No, I see the screens.
I see the
I
screen.
see the screen also.
Oh,
I think
it's
it has
all
to do
my
with this.
fault. It usually is my fault. Okay. I'm looking at the spring and fall now. Sorry.
Okay, so the vernal pool you're looking at here was built as a restoration project, and it's been functioning quite well for many, many years, which is really good news. Okay, I am going to advance to the next one here. All right, now vernal pools, they may be located in open areas that are sunlit locations, and they may be located in shaded areas. And this vernal pool you're looking at here, it contains quite a diversity of plants because it's in the sun. Just like you would never plant a garden in the shade, vernal pools, when they're in the sun, they get that light, and we get this great diversity of plants Now, this vernal pool is not connected to groundwater. It has a base of compacted clay and it holds water just like a cereal bowl, but in the fall, it will go dry. Now, vernal pools, they're really exciting places to visit. And when you go to a vernal pool, you can't help but smile and laugh because you're seeing wildlife. You're seeing wildlife species that you won't see anywhere else because of that shallow water and that sunlight that makes so productive. Now, when you visit a vernal pool, I lose people's attention because they start seeing these. So here, this individual, he crawled out on a log so he could take a close-up photo of a frog. And that's how excited people get when they visit a vernal pool. Now, this is a small vernal pool. They can be any size. And this one's really important to the Western chorus frog. And I made a recording of the frogs, the chorus frogs that were calling in this vernal pool. And this is near Tampico, Indiana. And oh, you hear a lot of frogs using this. Now, vernal pools are fun places for children to explore, and also they're safe places for children to explore because of that shallow water, and they generally have a firm bottom where they're not going to get stuck in the mud. Now, when you visit a vernal pool, you may see wood ducks. I think they're the most beautiful animal, one of the most beautiful waterfowl species on Earth. The male has these bright colors, and they're just wonderful to watch. They use vernal pools because there's quite a bit for them to eat in a vernal pool. Now, we all know what mallards look like, otherwise known as greenheads. And the mallards are frequent visitors to the vernal pools because there's so much for them to eat in the vernal pool. That shallow water, they can reach the bottom and find all sorts of invertebrates and seeds to consume. Now, the vernal pools are going to contain an abundance of invertebrates, and that's why we see ducklings using vernal pools. If you're a duckling and you want to grow fast, visit a vernal pool, and there's going to be a lot for you to eat, and the parents will take the ducklings to the vernal pools so they can fill up on all the good food in the vernal pool. Now, white-tailed deer will use vernal pools. Now, of course, they're going to drink the water out of a vernal pool, but research shows that they gain a lot of sodium from eating the plants that are growing in the vernal pool. Aquatic plants can contain over 10,000 parts per million of sodium, and this is many, many more times than plants growing on dry land. So the female deer, they need the water when they're nursing, and all the other deer of all ages will benefit from the sodium and potassium that they gain from the aquatic plants. Now, this is a rusty colored blackbird, rusty blackbird, and they live and depend on vernal pools for their livelihood. And this is a blackbird we don't see too often. Their populations are declining across North America, mainly because we don't have that many vernal pool wetland areas. Now, bats will use vernal pools, and when you want to see bats using a vernal pool, you'll notice that they're swooping low, and they're actually drinking water on the fly. And when I used to trap bats, we would hang the nets, mist nets, over a vernal pool. And when we caught the bats, their chins would be wet because they would be drinking water out of the vernal pools. Now, everybody loves turtles. I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't like a turtle. Turtles, like this eastern box turtle, they will use vernal pools for food and water. And in the summer, when it's hot and they need to cool, they will burrow into the mud and they'll live in that vernal pool. And they can even overwinter in a vernal pool by digging into the mud so they can hibernate. Shorebirds, which we like to see along the ocean, this is the American avocet. They make great use of vernal pools, and they use them for feeding during migration. These birds will be flying overhead almost a mile high, and they will see the mud surrounding a vernal pool that's going dry, and they're going to land and stop over and feed on all there is to eat in a vernal pool. Now, many different flowers will grow near vernal pools because of the moist soil. This is called rose mallow. Another name for it is hibiscus. It's a flowering plant that grows along the edge of the vernal pools. And the juices of this plant were used many years ago to make marshmallows. We gave the puff to the marshmallows, Now we use corn syrup. This is the cardinal flower. You'll see this growing around the edges of vernal pools that have partial shade. And this is so named because the bright colors reminded people of the beautiful robes worn by the cardinals in the Catholic Church. This plant is called bidens. A common name for it is beggar's tick because of the seeds that will stick to your clothing in the fall. And bidens is a plant that grows in vernal pools and it needs sunlight. And bidens is very important to pollinators like bees and butterflies because it flowers a long time. It's just a critical plant to them. You're looking at the flower of a button bush that grows in vernal pools, and of course, a monarch butterfly. The button bush will flower quite a while, and the monarch butterfly will seek out the button bush and use this flower. And it's just an important species of plant to pollinators. You're looking at swamp milkweed and a monarch. The swamp milkweed will grow in the moist soil around a vernal pool, and it will flower again for quite a while. And we see that around vernal pools, we have many of these flowering plants that are growing because of the moist soil compared to drier ground. And we get quite a diversity of plants around a vernal pool. Now, maybe you've seen butterflies using the water in mud. Well, the monarch is using this mud and actually lapping up the water because it's high in minerals. And butterflies and moths will really use the water in the mud around a vernal pool because of their need for minerals. This is an endangered species, a rusty-patched bumblebee, and it will find a diversity of plants in which to gain, its pollen, its nectar. And these plants are growing around vernal pools, these shallow water wetlands that go dry in the fall. Vernal pools do not support fish because they go dry. Because they go dry each year, if there are fish in the vernal pool, the fish will be consumed by predators like great blue herons and bald eagles. And the lack of fish is what makes vernal pools such a unique ecosystem. Now, when you have fish in a wetland area, the fish have to eat, and they'll basically eat whatever they can get in their mouth. So fish will eat any animal they can find, explaining why we have low populations of frogs and toads and salamanders and invertebrates in a wetland that has fish. But if you have a wetland that goes dry, we're going to have a great diversity of animals because the fish are not eating them. Another bonus to living in a vernal pool is that you're not as likely to be eaten by a bullfrog. Now, the bullfrog lives in wetlands that contain water over two years in a row. They need perennial water because when they lay their eggs in a wetland, their larvae or tadpoles take 2 years to develop. So if the vernal pool dries each fall, then the bullfrog's not able to reproduce successfully, and we'll have lower numbers of bullfrogs, and that means we'll have greater diversity of other frogs and invertebrates. Now, maybe you've seen a fairy shrimp. Some people call these sea monkeys. The only place you're going to find fairy shrimp living and breeding is in a vernal pool that does not contain fish. If there are fish in a vernal pool, they're going to eat all of the fairy shrimp. Now, these young men just found fairy shrimp in a vernal pool during the month of January in Kentucky. Now, this vernal pool wouldn't win any beauty contests. It's really quite unattractive, but it provides this critical habitat to crustaceans like the fairy shrimp. And the fairy shrimp is used by ducks for food. So if you have fairy shrimp, you have ducks that will find them and eat them. This is a clam shrimp. It's another crustacean, and it depends on vernal pools for its livelihood. The clam shrimp is a very important food item for waterfowl and also an important food item for salamanders. This is a dragonfly larva, and these live in vernal pools, and the dragonflies will lay their eggs in vernal pools, and the larval dragonflies are mosquito eaters. So if you have larval dragonfly in your wetland, more than likely you're not going to have any mosquitoes or mosquito larvae. You wonder why ducks are using this wetland. Well, because they're finding a lot to eat. We know that many ducks will tip up to eat, the puddle ducks. And if they're finding a lot to eat, they're going to stay in that wetland. And that's why they're using this vernal pool. Now, I was driving by this vernal pool and I stopped to snap this photograph. Why? Because there were so many ducks on this vernal pool. I knew it was a vernal pool because there's a lot of ducks finding a lot to eat. It's teeming with invertebrates and seeds because there are no fish. Now, I like fish and I love to eat fish. I love to go fishing. But if you want to help waterfowl and if you want to help frogs, toads, and salamanders, give them a habitat without fish where they won't get eaten. Now, this is a natural vernal pool, meaning it's one humans did not build, and it's on the Danube National Forest in Kentucky. It supports quite a diversity of frogs, toads, and salamanders because it doesn't contain fish. This is a spring peeper that's using the vernal pool. You can tell the spring peeper because of the X on its back, and they successfully reproduce in vernal pools. Here's a chorus frog. You see the stripes on its back, and they successfully reproduce in vernal pools because there are no fish that eat them or their eggs. These are American toad larvae or tadpole, and these will use vernal pools, the shallow water that becomes quite warm in the spring, and the tadpoles are not eaten by fish because there are no fish in the vernal pool. Isn't that a beautiful salamander? This is a salamander, and it depends on vernal pools for laying its eggs. And the female will go into a dry vernal pool in the fall, and she will tunnel underneath a tree that's fallen into the vernal pool, and she'll lay her eggs. And the eggs will lay in the vernal pool beneath that tree until the winter when we start getting snow that's melting, and in the spring when we get all that rainfall. And the marbled salamander, its eggs are the first ones to hatch. And when you visit a vernal pool in the spring, the largest tadpoles you see are from the marbled salamander. This is a wood frog. It's a vernal pool species. It has a black mask. And the wood frog will reproduce in vernal pools because they do not contain fish or bullfrogs. Here are the eggs of the wood frog right here. And they look like you're holding on a clump of eyeballs. And you'll see these in February in a vernal pool when the ice is just melting on top of the water. And the wood frog is one of the few species that can freeze and come back to life. And they're in that vernal pool when that water is barely above freezing, laying their eggs. Now, vernal pools do not have to be attractive to have great value to wildlife. Now, this vernal pool is quite ugly to look at. It was actually made by elk in the state of New Mexico. It's an elk wallow. And they were wallowing in a place that had a high water table, and they made this vernal pool that was full of frogs and frog eggs. Even small vernal pools can have great value to animals. This vernal pool is about the size of a desk. It supports clam shrimp, marbled salamanders, and mountain chorus frogs. I know people who are building vernal pools this size in their backyard, and they're seeing frogs that are breeding in these vernal pools. Vernal pools can last a long time. Now, when I took ecology in college many years ago, they told us that wetlands were temporary features on the landscape. They were wrong. This is Cliff Palace Pond, a natural vernal pool wetland. It's in Jackson County, Kentucky. It's on the Danube National Forest. Cliff Palace Pond is surrounded by a mountain ridge. So it's way up on a mountain ridge, and it's surrounded by sandstone cliffs. The wetland is only 3 foot deep in the middle, and it will dry during a drought. The carbon-14 dating that we did shows that this wetland is 10,000 years old. That's pretty amazing. When you walk into Cliff Palace Pond, you'll find the bottom of it is quite firm. That indicates it dries every year, and it dries long enough for bacteria to decompose the leaves that have fallen into the water. So there's really no muck in the bottom of this vernal pool because the leaves decompose. There are no streams and no drainages that enter the wetland, and there is no dam that was constructed. No dam is present. but yet it's 10,000 years old. Now you are looking at a vernal pool wetland, and this was hand built by humans over 2,000 years ago. It's on a ridge about the Little Miami River, and it's at Fort Ancient Earthworks and Nature Preserve near Oregonia, Ohio. There are over 114 wetlands like this one that were hand dug on Fort Ancient Earthworks and Nature Preserve over 2,000 years ago. Now, the wetlands at Fort Ancient, they were dug by hand using sticks and tools with bones attached to them. The soil that was removed was carried by hand in baskets to build a 3.5-mile long berm that encircles the outer edge of this ridge above the Miami River, Little Miami River. The constructed earthworks is 23 feet high in places. The wetlands at Fort Ancient contain water in the summer, and they tend to dry they contain water in the winter and spring, and they dry in the summer and fall. And we call these the vernal ponds. And it's interesting that most of these vernal ponds at Fort Ancient are 1 to 3 feet deep, and they're deepest in the center, and they have gradual slopes around the edges. The wetlands at Fort Ancient, they contain clay that was purposely compacted by hand. And some of these vernal pools even contain gravel. They were lined with gravel. We're not sure why, maybe to keep them from getting muddy when people bathed. And the gravel was hand carried in baskets up from the Little Miami River. Pretty amazing, quite a hike to bring this up there. Now, humans, we can build wetlands that will last for many years. This is a beautiful wetland that was dug by hand in South Carolina near the city of Columbia, and it was hand dug in the 1700s using clay that was compacted. The soil was removed to make bricks, and the wetland's located on a mountain ridge and doesn't have an inlet or an outlet or a dam. And this is one of 7 wetlands that formed in an old gold mine in the 1850s at the Big Gun site at Michigan Bluff in California. This vernal pond wetland is located on the top of a mountain, and it's supplied primarily with groundwater. I took this photo in 2015 in December when there was a drought taking place, and the water had dropped over 4 feet during this drought. Vernal pools are once common features on the landscape. Most have now been filled in and drained. And this photo will shows you a number of vernal pools. They're on the Shawnee National Forest in Illinois. And this site was cleared of large trees, but it was never leveled and filled for farming. So the mounds you see are where the trees had fallen over historically. And the shallow water wetlands, those are vernal pools that formed when the big trees fell over. Vernal pools can be formed when a large tree falls over and there's a high water table, but these rarely contain water for more than a couple of weeks out of the year. This farmer is filling in a vernal pool wetland. Many of our vernal pool wetlands were filled in to create farm fields. This is how many vernal pools were destroyed across North America. These people are digging ditches using horses and these plows, and they're draining vernal pool wetlands so they can create farm fields. This is a good spot to restore a vernal pool. What you're looking at here are not natural streams. These are 2 ditches, and the ditches were hand dug to drain vernal pool wetlands. And this is in Rowan County, Kentucky. People have been burying structures made from wood and stone to drain wetlands and vernal pools for hundreds of years. So you would dig a ditch to drain the vernal pool so you could farm it, but instead of having to cross the ditch, you would put a structure in the bottom of the ditch and then fill the ditch with soil, and that way you could farm over the top. Here's a professor, and he's teaching the class how to drain vernal pool wetlands by installing buried clay tile. These clay tile are 12 inches long, they're 4 inches in diameter, and they were buried tightly against each other. And this is how we drained many wetlands across the North America. And here's where these clay tiles were installed years ago to drain vernal pool, how tightly they were put up against each other. And when that soil cover was removed, the drain pipes failed to function the way they were installed years ago. You see these long and narrow vernal pools? We really call those dead furrows, and the high ground between them, we call it lands, L-A-N-D-S. And this was a way of rearranging soil in a vernal pool so that you could farm a wetland area. And this photo was taken in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Would you think about building a wetland here? I would. This forest used to be a wetland area. The red arrow shows you a ditch that was dug to drain the wetland over 200 years ago. The soil that was removed from digging the wet ditch was placed in a pile, and that's the ridge you see on the right-hand side of the ditch. Now, this allowed the area to be dry enough to raise crops for probably over 100 years, but they stopped farming it years ago, and the ditches is still working, but the trees have grown up because the water table has been lowered by the ditch. Now, many people think that you're going to find a lot of mosquitoes using vernal pools and wetlands, and this is why they don't want vernal pools in their community. Well, you are looking at mosquito larvae here. They're about 1/4 inches long, and they wiggle and they'll go to the surface where they can breathe oxygen. And you'll find them in temporary wetlands, not vernal pools. Now, the red circles show you where mosquitoes may be breeding in your community. These small puddles of water, they don't last long enough for other aquatic organisms to live in them. So you may find mosquitoes breeding in a bird bath, maybe in an outdoor grill that doesn't drain, or a tire, or a swimming pool, or even a child's toy, or even a wastebasket that has a lid off of it. These are all excellent sites for mosquitoes to breed. This ditch here is not a high quality wetland. This ditch was dug to drain a wetland, and we find mosquitoes breeding in this ditch. This tire was discarded and never disposed of properly, and I found mosquitoes breeding in that puddle of water that is not a healthy wetland. This 5-gallon bucket, it's an excellent mosquito breeder. We find mosquitoes laying their eggs and breeding in this wetland that is not healthy. This is a water trough on our farm. If I don't change the water every week, mosquitoes will breed in that water trough. And even this flower pot that has the hole plugged in the bottom, mosquitoes were breeding, and I found mosquito eggs and larvae in this flower pot. Now, when you have a healthy wetland, you'll have these larval dragonflies that are feeding on the larval mosquitoes. When you have a healthy wetland, you will have dragonflies flying around your wetland, feeding on the adult mosquitoes. When you have a healthy wetland, you'll have damselfly larvae feeding on the larvae of the mosquitoes. And you'll have adult damselflies that are feeding on the adult mosquitoes. And here are some of the mosquito predators that you will find in a vernal pool wetland. Everything from the predaceous diving beetle to salamander larvae. All these are mosquito eaters. And during the day around a healthy wetland, you'll find tree swallows feeding on the adult mosquitoes. So bats will feed on the mosquitoes at night around a wetland area. So what do we say about a healthy wetland? Mosquitoes may check in, but they won't check out. Vernal pools support a diversity of animals that eat mosquitoes. So these vernal pools will not cause problems in your community with mosquitoes. The good news is vernal pools can be built. They can be restored. You are looking at a vernal pool wetland that we built in Kentucky by restoring a wetland in a farm field. Individuals are building vernal pools across North America to provide habitat for a wide diversity of plants and animals. We built this vernal pool in Kentucky in the Danube National Forest, and it's supplied primarily with groundwater. Here's a large field that used to be a wetland on the Muscatatuck National Wildlife Refuge in Indiana. And this field was made by filling and draining wetlands over 100 years ago. We decided to use heavy equipment to restore a vernal pool from this field to provide sandhill cranes with habitat while they're migrating. Looks like the project worked. Over 1,000 sandhill cranes are using this vernal pool that we built, Muscatatuck, Indiana. They found this while they were migrating. They came out of the sky and they spent days in and around this vernal pool. Now, this is called an eastern spadefoot. It's not a frog, it's not a toad, it's somewhere halfway in between. Now, their populations are declining in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island, and this species requires vernal pools for breeding. It has to lay its eggs in a vernal pool that doesn't have fish or bullfrogs. Now, here is a vernal pool that we built on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I've been working with Ian Ives with Mass Audubon over 10 years to build vernal pools to provide breeding habitat for the eastern spadefoot, quite a rare species. And here's one of the sites where we're planning to build a vernal pool wetland on Cape Cod. It's what we call a canopy gap in the forest. There's very few trees growing here. It has a slope less than 6%. It has a change in elevation less than 3 feet from upper to lower edge. Now, in order to build a vernal pool here, we need to use an aquatic safe liner because the soil is high in sand and it won't hold water, and the groundwater is far below the surface. So I'll show you how we're going to do this. First of all, we brought in an excavator, and the excavator removed the topsoil and saved it in a pile for us to spread in depleted wetland. Then the excavator started digging a depression that was deepest in the middle, and we were out there taking all sorts of elevations using a laser and measuring this basin to make sure it would be the same size as the liner that we had ordered. Now here's the basin that's ready for an aquatic safe liner. And notice the gradual slopes. It looks like a giant satellite dish. It's deepest in the middle. And here volunteers are helping with this project. After they did a lot of hand raking, they spread this geotextile fabric in the basin, and now they're putting in an aquatic safe liner, like what's used in a swimming pool. And this liner is aquatic safe. It's not treated with any chemicals. You can actually drink the water out of it. And we're putting in a sandwich, we're putting in a geotextile layer, we're putting in the liner, and on top of it, we put another layer of geotextile. Then we anchor the top edge using landscape spikes so it doesn't shift when we're covering it with soil. And here the excavator operator is placing that soil over the liner, a 6-inch layer. And this is important because plants can grow over the liner. And it's also important because animals like the turtles and the frogs can burrow into the soil to escape predators. So we use an aquatic safe liner, and I've developed a number of steps that are, help us build a wetland on sites with sandy soil or gravelly soil. And the way we're building these, I believe that these wetlands can last forever. The way we're building them, no dam, no water control structure, and they hold water seasonally. Okay, this is a finished wetland basin, and we've installed the aquatic safe liner, and we've covered it with the soil, and we are now spreading straw for mulch so we don't have erosion, and also we're planting native species. And we plant many native species of plants in and around these wetland areas, and this helps pollinators like the rusty patched bumblebee. And also, we find that the eastern spadefoot it lays its eggs in these constructed vernal pools on Cape Cod. So this is an egg mass of the eastern spadefoot. It took over 8 years for them to start using these vernal pools, but now they're successfully using them. And this is really important because they were only found in one other vernal pool on Cape Cod. Now we have them using a number of these vernal pools that we've constructed. And here are the spadefoot eggs that have hatched, and they've developed into these little toadlets. And the eastern spadefoots that have developed from the larva, they're now returning to the vernal pools that we built, and they're laying their eggs and they're breeding. So we were successful in bringing back the eastern spadefoot to many parts of Cape Cod. Okay, maybe you've been to Kings Gap State Park in Pennsylvania. It's near the city of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And if you visit Kings Gap, you're going to see these signs telling you about the vernal pools, the Forest Pools Reserve at Kings Gap. And this is one of the biggest attractions at Kings Gap is to visit the vernal pools. And this sign describes the importance of the vernal pools to breeding wood frogs, spotted salamanders, marble salamanders, and crustaceans. There are interpretive trails that lead you to the vernal pools at Kings Gap. But unfortunately, the vernal pools were not working the way they used to. Historically, the vernal pools would fill when snow melted and hold water long enough for frogs and toads and salamanders to develop. But these vernal pools were going dry and dry too early and stranding all the larvae before they could develop. No one could determine why the vernal pools were going dry. We thought it was climate change. I came into the area and did quite a bit of testing with volunteers in the community. And what we determined is that the vernal pools historically were supplied with groundwater, but the elevation of the water table had dropped, primarily due to extraction of water in the valley, probably by many of the people that had built homes recently. And so it was really bad news for the frogs and the turtles and the toads and the salamanders. So we had to figure out how to bring back the water in these vernal pools. Starting in 2010, we began restoring the vernal pools. And one of the first steps was to remove the leaves in the vernal pool basin and to save them to put back in the vernal pool. And then we removed the mosses before we restored the vernal pool. And we returned those to higher ground around the vernal pool after they were built. We brought in an excavator from the Upper Susquehanna Coalition in New York, and the restoration team worked with us to restore the vernal pools. And here we are removing the topsoil and saving it to respread in the vernal pool. And here's one of the vernal pools that we restored shortly after restoration. And we used the compacted clay liner technique because there was clay on the site. So we removed the clay, put it back in layers, formed a basin. Then also we used the aquatic safe liner technique in some of the vernal pools, and others we simply dug deeper to get at the groundwater. So here is one of the vernal pools we rebuilt by digging deeper to get into the groundwater, and it's just starting to fill with groundwater. Here's one of the vernal pools that we rebuilt using the safe liner because there was no clay and no groundwater. And we had a workshop here where people could come in and learn these techniques. And we have people coming in from the whole area to learn how to build vernal pools. And here's one of the vernal pools we built by using compacted clay liner technique. This is 1 year after construction. This vernal pool at Kings Gap, we restored this one by using the groundwater technique. And here's what it appears a few years later. And here's one we rebuilt using an aquatic safe liner. And this liner was protected by geotextile that was covered with soil. And what you'll notice is that these wetlands all look the same. They're all successful, whether you use clay, whether you use groundwater, or whether you use an aquatic safe liner that was buried in the ground. Now, I know folks who are now building vernal pools at their homes. And this is Tim Morton, and he built this vernal pool by hand. Isn't that amazing? And he found all these plants and planted them. And this is near Cincinnati, Ohio. I think that is just a beautiful feature. It sure looks natural, and the frogs and the toads and salamanders are really using it. Here's a vernal pool wetland that we built at an elementary school in Rowan County, Kentucky. And many, many students helped us build this vernal pool, and they're using it for environmental education because there's so much to learn near a vernal pool. And here's a vernal pool that cleans runoff from a site, and we built this near Moorhead, Kentucky. And here's one that we built at a school in an urban area, a small town called Prestonburg. And this wetland is used by a diversity of dragonflies and amphibians, even though it's in an urban area. And this vernal pool captures runoff from the roof at Rodward Elementary School in Moorhead, Kentucky, and it's full of dragonflies and frogs. And this vernal pool, we built this in a dry stormwater detention basin using an aquatic safe liner, and it added so much diversity to this dry stormwater basin. Now, you know that if you get students out to them a net and you open up a world of wonder to them when they start catching all the animals that live in a vernal pool. And research shows that hands-on experiential education is something that students remember forever. And their mathematics scores and their science scores greatly improve when they have vernal pools to examine and to explore. I ask you to consider involving students in the design and construction and planting of small wetlands at schools. These students are learning about native plants and non-native plants. And they're learning about vernal pools by planting around a vernal pool they helped build at this elementary school near Louisville, Kentucky. Restoring a wetland can be a lot of fun. Returning those leaves to the wetland area to provide good habitat for invertebrates. Okay, so in May of this year, I worked with Dr. Margaret Foss and others, and we restored suitable locations for building vernal pond wetlands at the Robert C. Corby Arboretum Sanctuary in the village of Pittsford, New York. And we spent several days examining the area carefully, looking at the wetlands that were present, looking at the wetlands that were not available, like the vernal ponds. And we did a lot of this and wrote this report that's dated May 6th. And I'm sure that Margaret would be willing to share this with you so you will learn more about these wetlands that we designed. And here's an aerial photo, and the blue circles show where the wetlands were designed. So if you get out there and do hiking, you may recognize some of these places. And this is where the vernal pool wetlands may be built. And here's one of the sites. We call this vernal pond number 1. It's not a vernal pool now, but it could be. And this site, it's been heavily disturbed. There's been, you know, plastic material put on the surface and gravel to kill weeds. And this is a good site because it's level. It has less than a 6% slope. And we could build a vernal pool on this site. Now, here's another location where we designed a vernal pool. And all these are roughly 40 feet in diameter. And the orange colored flags show you where the vernal pool could be built. Now, the surface of the ground is uneven here, and it's mowed grasses. And I think one of the main reasons the surface of the ground is uneven is that there are things buried in the ground here. I understand this used to be a landfill, so there's a thick layer of soil over the top. And we could build a vernal pool here without disturbing what's underneath, just by making a shallow vernal pool in this covering of soil. And the water quality would be high in the vernal pool. Because of the vernal pool, the water would be maintained by these aquatic safe liners. Here's vernal pool site 3, also in a field that is covering with soil covering the landfill. The orange flags show you where the vernal pool could be built, and we could easily build one of these in a day using a small excavator. And here's what vernal pool looks like on the ground. You can see the ground cover that's present. Nothing rare, nothing uncommon. Now, these vernal pool wetlands that we designed at the Arboretum, they could be built by students, by adults, by community members, and they would work with the heavy equipment operator, and I would be on site helping with the project. And people learn about vernal pools and how important to view. And this training, they could become actively involved in the construction of vernal pools, and they would learn so much about the environment and how we humans can help these different species of wildlife. The hands-on activities that would take place during the workshop, you will learn how to make a ribbon out of the clay soil to know if there's enough clay to build a wetland without a liner. And you will learn how to build toad houses. So here we have a participant at a workshop in California, and she built this beautiful functional house for the California red-legged frog near a new vernal pool wetland that we built in the background. And if you're not interested in the hands-on experience, you are welcome to stand by and watch the vernal pool get built. We need your support, and you don't have to get your hands dirty. Breeding habitat for frogs, toads, and salamanders. They're being built to replace the wetlands that have been drained and filled over the last 200 years. And the moist soil surrounding these vernal pools is going to provide outstanding conditions for flowering plants to grow that will benefit a diversity of pollinators. These flowering plants are going to add great beauty to the landscape to really help type of habitat. So vernal pools, we know how to build these to last for a very long time. I'd like to say that I would guarantee them for 2,000 years. Well, I think we're ready to do that. They're going to last for a long time when we build them. So I encourage you to support the construction of the vernal pools that we've designed at the Arboretum. And I really thank you for joining us in this presentation to learn more about these habitats. If you'd like to learn more about vernal pools and wetlands, I encourage you to read these books that I've written about vernal pools and about wetland areas, and to contact me if you would like help designing vernal pool wetlands in your community. Okay, this concludes the presentation. I'm wondering if I should return control back to Matthew or Margot. I'll go ahead and close out the presentation here. Okay.
Well, I am so excited by what you just showed us. And if everyone else on this phone call is not excited, then they need to come and have some therapy because it was just exactly what we needed and what we wanted. And I appreciate it so much. We do have a few questions here, and Holly asked, why were the pools constructed 2,000 years ago? What were people using them for at that time?
We don't know. Archaeologists have done the excavations and have dated the material that they find. And they don't know why the vernal pools were constructed or the long 3.5 mile ridge of soil. We think it was for religious reasons because artifacts are found from the East Coast and from the West Coast.
Wow. So they all came together from East and West. There were people making spiritual journeys, it sounds like. Matthew, is there something wrong with the recording, dear?
Not the recording. We seem to have lost Tom. He's been kind of cutting it in and out on my end a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hi, Margo.
hopefully he'll come back.
Hi, Robert.
Great presentation. I listened to almost all of it. It was wonderful.
Yes, I saw when you came in, and delighted to see you. And Tom's coming back in. I have a couple of other questions from other people, and maybe you have some comments or questions you would like to share.
I do.
I'm sure you do. Everybody,
Please.
this is the R is Rob Corby, the former mayor of the village of Pittsford for 28 years, and he's still devoted to the Arboretum, devoted to making everything happen that needs to happen to have it be not only an Arboretum, but for which I'm growing some nursery trees, and but also a wildlife sanctuary. So this will add wonderfully to.
So my question is very specific, Tom.
I don't think Tom's on.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
am. I can hear you.
Oh, you
Yes.
are, okay,
I'm here.
he's, Rob is gonna butt in, and then I'll get to other questions. Come on, Rob, show your
Okay.
face.
My question is, the Friends of the Arboretum are scheduling a few work party sessions this fall. And is there any area we could do any work we could do in the area of the 3 proposed vernal ponds that would help prepare them for the eventual construction of the ponds?
Yes, the control of any non-native invasive plants that you want removed. Yes, that would be good.
Okay, we'll take that order and get working on it.
And then any trees that have fallen, it would be great to set those aside, large woody debris. You know, any trees or large branches, they could, put those along the edge of the woods and save them for when you're ready to build.
We have lots of stuff like that available for the use of the
Great.
project.
Good, good.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Great presentation, by the way.
Well, thank you for joining us.
I'm so glad you could get here, Rob.
Me
Carol
too.
has a question about whether we stock new vernal ponds with some types of consumers of mosquitoes, or do we just wait for the diversity to develop by itself?
You know what happens when I build a vernal pool and we're at a school, they usually want to fill it with water. As we're filling it with water, the dragonflies come in and start laying their eggs. So we find that the diving beetles, the frogs, the toads, the salamanders, they will find these things within days of construction if there's any water in them. So no need to add any mosquito control. These animals will find it on their own, which is good news.
That is very, very good news. You showed a school, this is my question, you just showed a school with a vernal pond and you said it was filled by runoff from the school. And I wondered if you had to construct some kind of piping to get the rainwater into the pool because it seemed a fair distance away.
Yes, what happened is that at that school, they did have a buried drain pipe and we built the vernal pool so it would collect the water from the drain pipe.
So
But-
so anybody who has a drain pipe could conceivably
Sure,
a vernal
sure.
pond at the end of it. Someone wrote me
Yeah.
today and said that they have a large property and water tends to collect there, and they may already have a vernal pond, but they could certainly enhance it. But the
Sure.
collection of rainwater, I think, is a very important climate initiative. That some cities have actually adopted the collection of rainwater from every single
Sure,
source that they can, because it's ridiculous just to let it
sure,
run off into the streets.
sure.
Here's a
I saw
new
one question. I saw one question from somebody. They were asking if they needed to fill a vernal pool after construction. And I rarely, if ever, do that. I just let the rain fill them up. It seems like, we will get some heavy rains during the summer that can fill a vernal pool. So I just recommend after you're constructing it, after you build it, just to let it fill up. Another person had a question, is there a minimum size? No, vernal pools can be any size. They can be 6 feet in diameter. The only thing is if you build a tiny one, it may fill up with leaves, was what I found. Generally, when we're out in the forested areas, the vernal pools are at least 40 feet in diameter, but the smaller ones, they can fill with leaves. And so if you build a tiny one at your house, you may need to remove the leaves every couple of years. Otherwise, it could fill in with leaves.
We've got a nice park near where many of us live. And I notice in the spring, there are lots of depressions that are filled with water. They're all in the shade, however. Do you suppose they're accomplishing much in the way of what a built vernal pool would?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. What you're looking at are filled in wetlands. You're looking at the ghosts of the wetlands that are filled in. So those depressions are where the soil has settled. And yeah, they filled in wetlands there. So I vernal pools.
So, in a sense, they're doing the job. That all the things you've described are
No,
happening in
no, the
those.
hydro period would be too short. Once you
Okay.
fill in a vernal pool, it may hold a tiny bit of water after a heavy rain, may hold 3 or 4 inches. but then it soaks into the ground, or maybe there are buried drain pipes that carry the water off. But like if you go to a park or look at a field and there's been a heavy rain, like a 2-inch rain, and you see puddles, if you go back in 2 days, 3 days, those puddles will probably be gone. And that's where the mosquitoes are breeding. So vernal pools generally hold water for, 35 to 40 days minimum. And that gives the mosquito predators a chance to live in that water and eat the mosquitoes. But if your wetland is holding water for only a couple weeks or less, boy, it is a mosquito breeder then. It's probably a filled in wetland.
But with 40 days or
So one of the books I wrote, Wetland Drainage Restoration and Repair, it goes into great detail about how to recognize a drained wetland. And when you read that book, it'll change how you look at the landscape forever. You will see drained wetlands all over.
on the other hand, if you make some observations and you find that it stays wet with, several inches of water for 40 or 50 days, then you've got something you want, it sounds like.
Yes, and what you can look for are indicators of vernal pools like the wood frog, the marbled salamander, the dragonfly larva. Those would indicate that it holds water long enough.
So
But if you only find mosquitoes, then that would.
so the ponds that Tom designed for the Arboretum and Wildlife Sanctuary vary in depth. And some are 8 inches, one is 8 inches, one is 12, and one is 16, if I recall correctly. And what that means is that if we have a very hot climate, then the 16-inch one will be better. If it's a cooler, then the 8-inch one will be better. And so it would behoove us to raise $24,000 so that we can have all three and have the best of all worlds. Right now, we have $3,500 towards the first one.
Folks,
One will cost $8,000. And we have a number of fundraising opportunities coming up. So any ideas any of you have for helping us along with this project, we will get to in a minute, but I want to make sure there are still questions for, if there are still questions for Tom before we go on to that part of the program.
Let me ask you another one. If I'm driving around and I see a low area with cattails, does that say anything about whether it is or is not a vernal pool?
Okay. If you see an area growing cattails, what that shows us is that the ground stays wet all year. The ground is saturated. We have a high water table. So that tells me that the area probably doesn't dry out. Usually when you see cattails, it can dry out, but usually it doesn't. So that could indicate perennial water. But again, we'd have to get out and walk it and see if there's any standing water. But I mean, the cattails tell us it's a wetland.
Can the frogs and invertebrates build in a
Oh,
breed?
yes. Oh, yeah.
Cattail,
You find
perennial
lots of
waters?
frogs. Oh, yeah. Lots of frogs living in, and toads living in wetlands with cattails. Yes.
Do
But
they
oftentimes it shows us a wetland that's been partially drained. And that's why the cattails have taken over. So many times when I see cattails that are dense, that shows me that the wetland has been partially drained. And about, one of the few plants that can survive is the cattail.
do they need to be cleaned up in any way or
Well,
opening?
I always like to restore wetlands. I look for ditches and buried drain pipes, and where I can, I like to restore the wetlands. That's a
But
good thing to do.
it might be easier to build a new vernal pond than to try to restore a catland field.
Yes. Yes.
A cat.
Yep.
Cat.
There's a lot of regulations that would make. And there's a lot of regulations we would have to go through to change cattails. Yes.
Try to get the tail by the cat or the cat by the tail.
But I want to bring up the cost of building these vernal pools, okay? 40-foot diameter that could last for hundreds of years for $8,000. what does it cost? Okay, if I wanted to move to your community, what would I have to pay to purchase a 3-bedroom home with an attached garage on a 1/4 acre lot?
Five
Would it
hundred
be a
thousand
$500,000? How much?
$500,000.
Half a million. You know how many wetlands we could build for the cost of one house? And this is the difference, is that it's not being done by an engineering company for profit. If you hire an engineering company to design, build a wetland, oh, it's going to be, 40, 50 times higher in the price. So this is, everything's going right towards building that wetland. And the most expensive thing is to purchase is that aquatic safe liner. But that's because the sites are so rocky and sandy. That's the only way we'll get them to hold water. But we'll bury it. You won't even know it's there.
So fun. So exciting. Let me see if there are anything more in the chat.
So that's a good price, anyways.
Oh, it's a fantastic
It's
price.
interesting for our 25th wedding anniversary, we built a vernal pond wetland in our, where we used to live. And the children had such a great time ice skating, floating boats and catching frogs, and just a wonderful habitat. I think we had another question. Did you see that one that came in?
Please, if you saw it, it was, you already answered this one about kickstarting it by filling it with water, and you said no. And you mentioned the heavy summer rains, because some people think you have to build it in the fall so it will get the benefit of snow
Oh,
and
no.
so forth in the spring rains. But I think doing it around everybody, take note, be available. Do we have to provide our own hard hats? Tom, do we have to
That's up
provide
to you
our own
folks,
hard hat?
whatever regulations you have. I do have 30 hard hats that I can bring.
30? Or
I do have 30 hard hats that I will bring,
30?
yes.
Okay,
But if you stay away from the heavy equipment, you won't have to wear it.
right. Well, I'm not gonna go running under it, but who wants to say, gee, I'd like to do this, or gee, I'd like to do that? Mike, you're the new volunteer. Why don't you unmute yourself and say what you'd like to do? Mike?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, what would you like to do regarding this project that's coming up? I'm not
Uh,
gonna hold anybody to it. People change their minds all the time, so I'm very forgiving, but what would you like to do, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, I'm down to get my hands dirty all the way up to stand on the side and watch. It's really, I'm here just to have fun, and it's a great cause, and anything in nature is a great cause. So really,
Very good.
whatever you guys need me to do, if the schedule's open, I'd love to help. I have a little bit background in landscaping, and I worked at a
Good.
tree farm here locally, which was a great experience. So it really opened my mind in my world up to the world of botany, and it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, anything that you guys really need, I'd be down to help. Tabling.
Robert is already going to be getting his crew out, removing some of the Phragmites and the Japanese knotweed. So
Yeah.
I'm on that list, and so when I know when a crew is going out, they usually go out too early in the morning for me, but otherwise, I can let the early birds know about it.
I'll
Yeah,
make sure
please.
you know, Margaret, when we have our next work party scheduled.
I know, that would be great. Holly, how about you? You're a newcomer, and you got involved a little bit already over at a Frog House. What inspired you about tonight's meeting?
Oh, I thought it was really interesting to hear about the man-made pools and just how old they were and how long these things will last after you build them. That really, I don't know, sounded good to me, gave me some hope that this project, when we get it done, will be like enjoyed by generations of people afterwards.
Yeah. We're certainly going to have all the people who worked on it, and all the people who donated in any way, shape, or form, or we're going to collect their names and have them available on the website and on something at the vernal pond, so people can go to a QR code and say, "Oh, Holly, I knew Holly, I knew them, they were great." So we're also thinking about, what do you think about the idea, Tom? Because it's a little unnatural, but Rob and I went out to the Webster Arboretum, and one of the things they did to raise money was they had people buy bricks. So they bought the original bricks for $17, and then they sold them for $50 or something like that with their names on it. Do you think that those would fit into this natural habitat, or would it be too man-made looking?
Well, that's up to you folks. If you want to make a walkway, I know many, my wife is very active with our garden club, and they made a walkway and they used the bricks to make a walkway.
Mm-hmm. So that's something to think about. It is this which Jim is this? Is this Jim Mott who's here?
Yeah, Margot, it's Jim Wick.
Oh, Jim Wick, right. So what inspired you about tonight's
Just
occasion? What would you like to do besides
just
pulling nutweed?
trying to see where we are in our kind of next stages, next approach, and also getting this at some point through the village trustees for approval to go forward. So another round, and we keep picking at it, make it happen.
Well, we have all the approvals, and we have excitement, and I don't want to pick on people too much and embarrass them, but if anyone else would like to chip in and speak up, let's hear what you have to say.
Hi.
There's Victoria.
Right. I don't know what my keyboard, I can't see the place to raise my hand. So I don't know where it was on
Your
mine.
hand is raised, dear.
I understand that, but if I'm the only one, I just can't believe it. So I think this is amazing. What I could see as a possibility is to come at it as we are a team, whoever the team is that declares themselves so, in any way, but that we create a team that's going to build the wetlands, and we're in it because the vision of the future that you've shown us, Tom, about the gift we'd be giving to future generations by creating a place that we would love and that we will have other species around us. Otherwise, we will not have any other species around us. And so we're taking responsibility for building habitat so that we could have the things that we've always cherished last forever. And so this is a labor of love. But owning that, the future vision. And I think that's where we need to create an aligned future vision of what this looks like. And before the construction of it can go on as fast as it can, but from a community building group of people who will take care of this forever because they built it, which is, could be a huge portion of our area. It's just the kind of project to bring everyone together to create this habitat that our children's children will be able to appreciate, and that those species will not go extinct. It's just like, how can we not be doing this? And what a labor of love when you get the kind of education of what it is that we could create. Can you imagine? It's so easy for people to imagine things that they've seen and to realize that if they don't do something, those things will never be seen again. And to be excited about building that, like we could actually build that. Like whoever thought we could build that? And Tom, you're giving us that possibility of we can rebuild it. We don't have to be sad about the fact that it's gone and go too bad, you know. So, but it's so loving and creating and so joyful, and I think it's such a contribution to our culture as we are looking to build a bioregional culture, a community. You know, we totally embrace this, and you know, we're a possible Rochester, possible planet, but it's come alive for me tonight. You know, to see this as a long-term labor of love because we're building something that's actually physical and we're partnering with nature to do it, and that people are getting educated in the process. And the education can happen before the construction gets done or as we build out this future vision. But I think that that's what a frog house, you know, could you're building a frog house as the, you know, the center of this universe that we're making bigger and bigger for other than human species as we build this vision in the Arboretum. You know, I mean, it is us realizing we can do something to build something unbelievable.
Well, in terms of the
Sure.
fractal nature that you're talking about, Victoria, there's the expression think globally, act locally, but I think
Yeah.
we need to expand it and say act locally and influence globally or affect globally or change globally, because each little fractal adds to the whole as well as the whole informing the part. Rob, you're trying to talk?
No,
Oh.
that was my dog. Sorry.
Oh, you sound so alike. Do we have Tom still?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, okay. Yes, so many kudos. And in February of last year, I said this is what we're going to, a frog house is going to do this year, and it's coming true, and it's just so exciting. And if we can get the scouts and the school kids, and maybe the year after we'll build a pond and a school. Who knows? We don't know, but we have to get that first one funded. So everybody, I'm going to be harassing you left and right.
Great.
I don't want to bomb you with too many emails, but you can always erase them or unsubscribe if you don't like it. But just get supercharged if you want to be on this team.
Hey, Tom, I'd be curious of all of the people that understand this creation process now and who care about the environment and they understand what you're saying. And the gap is $8,000. That's like for most communities, that's not a lot, you know, and the community foundations should be interested in creating this as a model that can be done, you know, and just have it be a model. So I think, Margot, this should be something for the community foundation, that this would be a legacy. I mean, can you imagine? The community foundation is responsible for the regeneration of this area through creating
I agree.
opportunity for nature like this one. And there's so many others. So I see it from like people joining the team and what I would want to have for other people, because it's taken me a while to get here in this space that I see the possibility. But I'd love to see a movie, and maybe there is one that exists that talks about, you know, a visionary and some people creating, and then here's the output, and here's what happened along the way, and here's how this transformed crime and joblessness and blah, 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 because people realized that they were actually literally building a future for their children.
I do have those movies. If you go to my website, which is Wetland Restoration and Training, Wetland restoration and training.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
I do have a number of movies that are posted, just exactly what you just described, where communities have built these wetlands and what's happened after they built. Then also I have movies that I'm producing, videos on how to design and build a wetland.
Mhm.
So it's wetland restoration and training.com. And you're going to find all sorts of videos and movies and articles and news stories about communities that have, embraced wetlands and the positive values of them.
Yes, and if you
Thank you,
just look up Tom's name, Tom Biebighauser, it will go to his website also right away. But I wanted to mention one thing that we talked about early on, and someone was interested in what I think it was Holly, what they used those old ponds for, that 2,000-year-old vernal pond. And he said there's a place on his website called Fort Ancient, which is got a lot of information about those ancient vernal ponds, 2,000 years old and perhaps older.
Wait.
Anyone else? Tom, I hope
just-
it's going to be a good recording that you did, because you're way out
Yes.
in Idaho. Our connection wasn't always perfect, but hopefully we can get the best of it and have a really good recording for our website and for yours. So thank you so much. Last call for comments.
But it's okay. Yes.
I do have another question. Like, it occurs to me that people care about saving habitat for, regarding biodiversity, and we're all on the defensive side. And all this is creating habitat, So stop saving habitat and start creating habitats, Because
So very easily.
saving habitats is a concept. But creating habitats is not a concept. It's a um, maybe it's a century project or something, that whoever's around here is doing this for the next century, the Century Club or something like that.
Speaking of the
Very
Century
good.
Club, you
Yes.
can sign up for the gala at the Century Club on November 9th.
You know why I think this could be valuable here in Rochester is that if we created, and I think a frog house is not just a Pittsford phenomenon, it's a regional phenomenon, what you offer at the frog house. So I think we should create a structure so that people who are looking for something to believe in can have a role in building this, because we would waste a huge opportunity if we just built something. But what we want to do is have people involved, like they want it. They want in on it. They want to be there from the ground floor. And when you're in on the ground floor of this kind of project, you can always look back and say, look what I contributed to. And people don't have the opportunity to do that anymore. And in this time of climate change, this is the perfect kind of activity for grab people and have them be excited about the future that they're building and putting their spare time into it, like a community project that means something. So Rob Corby, that could be a campaign, is that we come back together as, the 13 states, colonies, we're going to create a new reality here in this area. And it's all about building a habitat for other life forms, which otherwise won't be here.
Well, I don't want to embarrass her, but she is on the call, and I introduced her at the birthday party. It is our own Sue Emmel, who introduced me to Rob. We all went for breakfast at a Eastern place in the city, and she is a very important prayer warrior or a spiritual leader. And so if she would like to say something, Sue, are we on your radar for prayer and giving people something to believe in?
Wow. Wow. I'm overwhelmed in a good way. I'm having glimmers. So that, that's the opposite of a trigger, is a glimmer. I'm having glimmers. Thank you so much. I would love, actually, now that you mention it, if people are interested, we could start some kind of an environmental devotional gathering. Some of it could be on Zoom like this, and some of it could actually be over in the environment.
In the Arboretum, right?
In the Arboretum.
Like it even better.
The devotional can be very, very creative. It doesn't have to be a devotional in words. It can be a devotional in service. It can be a devotional in meditation and contemplation on one of the sacred creatures that we encounter there, and just share that together. This is not my idea. This is our we are hatching this as we speak. Thank you.
Well, just this morning, I was talking to a young man who I've known for years, and he's finishing up nursing school. And he was talking about listening to a podcast about how we're all energy. And this, with that screensaver behind you, Sue, I mean, I'm going to get a little tearful here.
Okay.
We change the energy of this planet from bad to good. And Victoria and I belong to Pachamama, and they have a very important activity that's called listening to nature. And I don't know very much about it, but I think that we maybe could hook up with them and have a listening circle in the Arboretum. I'm so excited. I can't stand it.
I am too. I mean, let's just this be an idea that begins in words and ends in words. Let's make that an action and pick a time and date, and just to gather and just really pray for more inspiration. I think that the creatures there will inspire us as to what they want and need, and we'll be their arms and legs for them. We'll be the action plan for this. And I have another idea too that occurred to me while I'm listening both to Tom and to Margot, and of course Rob, is I just recently joined Rotary International. And we have a chapter right here in Pittsford. We meet in the library once a week at 7:00 in the morning on Wednesdays, and there's always a presentation on something having to do with us. And it occurred to me that both of you could present at different times from a different perspective. All three of you. Margot could present from her perspective of the Frog House. Tom can present from
Tom is very, very, very busy, and he's been extraordinarily generous. We could maybe share part of his recording, but I don't want to lean on him. He's coming in the spring to help us build our pond. So
we could actually maybe just take the presentation part of the recording and show that.
Yeah.
And then Rob, certainly, I don't know if you've ever presented to Rotary International.
I've already given the Rotary a presentation on the Arboretum.
And I think one about the Frog House, but we could certainly do something with Tom's presentation for sure.
We could, I think we could key them into the whole vernal ponds project, because that would be something they may offer assistance, or they may want to be part of the work party that helps us complete the project.
That, there you go, because it's a service-oriented organization. It's
Right.
international, it's fundraising, as well as service, offering service. So absolutely great. This has been fruitful.
Okay, if anyone wants to help me write some grants, that would be good. Tom is, I've already associated with Save the Frogs, and I think you said the Amphibian Foundation. But if anybody has ideas of other grants, I'm writing one with Victoria Impossible Rochester. So that would be something for the prayer list too. So we'll call it
Anything
a
I can
wish
do,
list, a prayer list.
anything I can do to help, Margot.
I know Robert has been an advisor since before we incorporated as 501c3, and his help has been invaluable. So, Tom, I think you've had a long day. You've been going at it since 5:30 this morning or something like that. What time did you start this morning, Tom?
Yes, a 3-hour time change.
Yeah.
Oh, 3-hour time change. So not
Okay, so
that
it's
bad. It's still
5:30
early.
there, and
Yes.
you better
8:30
get
there.
yourself organized for tomorrow
Well,
morning.
thank you for organizing this.
Oh,
I
yeah.
appreciate it.
I'm very
and
pleased.
Really
About
thrilled
6
with what,
people couldn't get on. I don't know why, but
you did well.
yeah, thank you. Okay.
Wish you the best.
High 4 for the frogs. We'll see
Yes,
you in April. I'll be talking to you.
thank you. Wish you the
Bye.
best. Bye.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you,
Love you.
Margot.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Right.
Good night, Tom. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Night.